Do you ever wake up around 3 a.m., eyes wide open, heart racing, mind suddenly alert even though your body is exhausted? And then the next morning, belly fat is still there, no matter how carefully you diet, exercise, or try to sleep earlier. If this keeps happening night after night, it's not random, and it's not just insomnia. The title of today's video is Waking Up at 3 a.m. and Can't Lose Belly Fat. Here's how to drop cortisol the right way. In this video, we're going to look at the 3 a.m. wake up through a completely different lens. Not willpower, not sleep hacks, and not generic advice like relax more. We're going to talk about your liver, nighttime blood sugar, cortisol, and why broken sleep can directly block visceral fat loss. If you've ever woken up at night with unexplained anxiety, slept long hours but still felt drained in the morning, struggled with stubborn belly fat despite doing everything right, this video is for you. Make sure to subscribe to the channel, turn on notifications, and watch until the end, because once you understand what the 3 a.m. signal really means, you can turn sleep from a metabolic obstacle into one of the most powerful fat-burning tools your body already has. Waking up consistently between 2 and 4 a.m., especially around the 3 a.m. mark, is not a form of random insomnia, as many people assume. It's not because you drank too much water, and it's not simply due to stress or low melatonin. When this pattern repeats night after night with the same signature racing heart, sudden alertness, a mind that instantly switches on, it signals a very specific biological message from the body. What stands out is that you don't wake up groggy, you wake up sharply alert. This tells us the awakening is not natural sleep completion, but an emergency wake-up response. Biologically, the body only activates this mechanism when it perceives an internal threat, not from the outside world, but from metabolic instability. To understand this, we must stop viewing sleep as passive rest and recognize it as an active, life-sustaining process. Even during deep sleep, the brain consumes energy at a high rate. In fact, the brain is the most glucose-demanding organ in the body, and it does not tolerate interruptions in fuel supply even briefly. When you go to bed, you enter an extended fast. Throughout the night, the brain relies entirely on the liver to maintain a steady stream of glucose. The liver functions like a battery. It stores sugar as glycogen during the day and releases it gradually overnight to fuel the brain, heart, and other vital organs. When this system works properly, you sleep through the night, unaware of the intense metabolic work happening behind the scenes. The problem arises when that battery is undercharged. In individuals with high daytime stress, chronically elevated cortisol, persistent anxiety, or heavy caffeine use, liver glycogen is depleted more rapidly. Stress is not just emotional, biologically. It is fuel-consuming. You may go to bed exhausted, but your liver may already be starting the night with inadequate reserves. As the night progresses and glycogen levels drop, blood sugar can fall below the brain's safety threshold. To the brain, this is a serious threat. It doesn't analyze or wait, it immediately triggers survival mode. The adrenal glands are commanded to release adrenaline and cortisol to stabilize the situation. Adrenaline is the instant wake-up chemical, which explains the sudden alertness and pounding heart. Cortisol, however, causes deeper damage. Cortisol generates glucose by breaking down the body's own tissue, primarily muscle, to maintain blood sugar through gluconeogenesis. In other words, at 3 a.m., you are in a catabolic state, not resting or recovering. This moment breaks the connection between sleep and fat burning. Under normal conditions, deep sleep is when growth hormone is released, one of the body's most powerful fat-burning and muscle-protective hormones. But elevated nighttime cortisol suppresses this process. Instead of burning fat, the body shifts into fat preservation and muscle breakdown, particularly targeting visceral fat, which is highly sensitive to stress signals. When the 3 a.m. wake-up pattern persists, it creates a vicious cycle: fragmented sleep, elevated nighttime cortisol, blocked fat-burning hormones, and morning fatigue with intense carbohydrate cravings. No matter how disciplined you are during the day, the body remains in defensive mode, and in that state, losing belly fat becomes extremely difficult. The key realization is this: your body is not betraying you. It is following survival programming, and only by understanding the biological meaning of the 3 a.m. signal can you begin to resolve the root cause, not by forcing sleep or restricting food further, but by restoring metabolic stability so the body feels safe throughout the night. The root of the problem lies in the liver, not just the brain. When people talk about sleep disruption or waking up at 3 a.m., they often focus on the brain, racing thoughts, anxiety, mental stress. But that is only the surface. The deeper truth is this. At night, the brain never truly sleeps in a biological sense. It continues to function constantly and demands a steady supply of fuel. That fuel does not come from recent meals. It comes from the liver. Throughout sleep, the brain consumes glucose at a significant rate to sustain vital functions such as heart rhythm, breathing, memory consolidation, and neural repair. When you go to bed, you enter an extended fast. During this time, the liver becomes the brain's sole energy provider. It releases glucose from stored glycogen slowly and steadily, much like a battery discharging in a controlled way to power the system overnight. In a healthy body, this process is so smooth that you remain completely unaware of it. You sleep deeply and wake up without realizing that your liver has been working non-stop to keep the brain supplied. But in individuals with high daytime stress, the situation changes dramatically. Chronic stress, elevated cortisol, persistent anxiety, and heavy caffeine use all accelerate glycogen depletion in the liver. Biologically, stress is not abstract. It is a signal that demands continuous energy mobilization. Elevated daytime cortisol promotes glucose release to cope with pressure, which gradually drains liver glycogen reserves. Caffeine, especially when consumed frequently or late, further stimulates the nervous system and increases energy expenditure, worsening the depletion. As a result, you may go to bed feeling exhausted, yet your liver begins the night with only about 30–40% of its energy reserve. This does not cause immediate problems when you fall asleep. But as the night progresses, glycogen continues to be released to fuel the brain. And by the middle of the night, often between 2 and 4 a.m., that reserve can run out. When the liver can no longer maintain stable blood glucose, blood sugar drops below the brain's safety threshold. This condition, known as nocturnal hypoglycemia, is not a minor inconvenience to the brain. It is perceived as a metabolic emergency. The brain has no energy storage capacity, so any interruption in glucose supply is interpreted as a direct threat to survival. The brain's response is immediate and forceful. It does not attempt to remain asleep. It triggers an internal alarm by sending strong signals to the adrenal glands. Adrenaline is released to wake you instantly, causing a racing heart and sudden alertness. At the same time, cortisol is released to generate glucose at all costs, even if that means breaking down the body's own tissue. This is a crucial point. The brain is not malfunctioning. It is executing a correct survival response. The problem is that when this response occurs night after night, it creates a hormonal environment that is deeply hostile to fat loss. Elevated nighttime cortisol not only disrupts sleep, but pushes the body into a catabolic state, breaking down muscle and preserving fat, particularly visceral fat, which is highly sensitive to stress signals. If the liver repeatedly lacks fuel at night, this cycle reinforces itself. You wake at 3 a.m., sleep becomes fragmented, and you feel exhausted in the morning. During the day, you rely on caffeine to function, which further increases stress and glycogen depletion. By nightfall, the liver again enters sleep underpowered, and the pattern repeats. Within this loop, belly fat becomes a protected energy reserve the body is unwilling to release. Understanding the liver's central role shifts how we approach the issue. Waking at 3 a.m. is not merely a sleep disorder. It is a sign of nighttime metabolic instability. And if you want to restore sleep and improve visceral fat loss, calming the brain alone is not enough. You must support the liver so it has sufficient energy to carry out its role throughout the night, breaking the stress, cortisol, belly fat cycle at its root. When nighttime blood glucose falls below a safe threshold, the brain does not interpret it as a mild inconvenience. To the brain, insufficient fuel represents a direct threat to survival. The brain has no energy storage capacity, so any interruption in glucose supply is treated as a serious danger. And when danger appears, biology does not hesitate. The moment the brain detects a lack of fuel, it immediately shifts into emergency mode. This is not a cognitive or emotional reaction, but a hardwired neuroendocrine reflex shaped by evolution. The brain sends an urgent signal to the adrenal glands, triggering the release of two key hormones, adrenaline and cortisol. These hormones are not designed to help you fall back asleep. They exist to wake you up, mobilize resources, and keep you alive. Adrenaline acts instantly. It increases heart rate, raises blood pressure, dilates airways, and activates the sympathetic nervous system. This is why waking at 3 a.m. feels sudden and intense. Your heart is racing, your mind is alert, and your body feels charged with nervous energy. No alarm clock is needed because your body has just administered an internal survival alert. Cortisol, however, creates the deeper metabolic consequences. Cortisol's primary job in this context is to produce glucose at all costs. When liver glycogen is insufficient, cortisol activates gluconeogenesis, the conversion of body tissue into sugar. The main raw material for this process is not fat, but muscle protein. This means that at 3 a.m., you are not resting or recovering. You are in a state of acute catabolism. The body is breaking down muscle tissue to stabilize blood sugar for the brain. In the short term, this strategy is life-saving. But when it happens repeatedly, the long-term effects become clear: muscle loss, hormonal disruption, and suppressed fat burning. Cortisol does more than generate glucose. It also sends a system-wide message. The environment is unsafe, and when the environment is perceived as unsafe, the body prioritizes energy conservation, not expenditure. From a biological standpoint, stress and fat burning cannot coexist. One activates defense, while the other only occurs in conditions of safety and surplus. This creates a paradox many people experience: disciplined eating and training during the day, followed by a powerful internal stress response at night. That stress response not only fragments sleep but erases the nighttime fat-burning window. Under normal conditions, deep sleep triggers growth hormone release, which protects muscle and mobilizes fat. Elevated cortisol blocks this process entirely. As this pattern repeats, the body adapts. Nighttime becomes coded as a dangerous period, and when night is perceived as dangerous, the body becomes increasingly reluctant to release stored fat, especially visceral fat, which serves as a strategic energy reserve during stress. This explains why individuals who frequently wake at 3 a.m. often develop a skinny fat profile, not overtly overweight, yet carrying stubborn abdominal fat. The crucial insight is this: your body is not working against you. It is executing survival programming precisely as designed. The problem is not the emergency response itself, but the fact that it is being triggered repeatedly in a modern environment that is not truly life-threatening. Once you understand that waking at 3 a.m. is a metabolic stress signal, you can shift from fighting the symptom to addressing the real cause. Many people believe that sleeping enough hours automatically leads to recovery and fat loss, but biology is far more selective. Not all sleep is equal. Only one specific phase, deep, slow-wave sleep, is where true regeneration and fat burning occur. And the hormone that orchestrates this process is growth hormone, HGH. HGH is not merely an anti-aging hormone. Biologically, it is the nighttime energy director. When HGH is released in the correct rhythm, the body prioritizes muscle preservation, cellular repair, and the use of fat as fuel. This is why a deep, uninterrupted night of sleep can leave you feeling leaner and lighter upon waking, even if the scale doesn't change. However, this finely tuned mechanism has a direct antagonist: cortisol. HGH and cortisol function like opposite ends of a hormonal seesaw. When one rises, the other must fall. Elevated nighttime cortisol does more than wake you up. It directly suppresses HGH release, eliminating the most critical fat-burning window of the entire day. When you wake at 3 a.m., due to low blood sugar, the cortisol spike does not resolve quickly. It creates a hormonal aftershock that lingers. Even if you manage to fall back asleep, the architecture of deep sleep has already been disrupted. The body struggles to re-enter full slow-wave sleep, and the HGH pulse is weakened or missed entirely. This shifts the entire nighttime purpose. Instead of regeneration, the body remains in a stress maintenance mode. Instead of mobilizing fat, it conserves it. And instead of restoring energy through fat oxidation, the body becomes increasingly reliant on quick-access fuels the following day, primarily glucose from carbohydrates. From here, a dangerous cycle emerges. Poor sleep raises nighttime cortisol. Elevated cortisol suppresses HGH. Low HGH reduces fat burning and muscle protection. You wake up tired, mentally foggy, and with unstable blood sugar. When blood sugar fluctuates, the brain seeks the fastest correction: carbohydrate cravings. These cravings are not a failure of discipline. They are biological compensation. The body missed its opportunity to burn fat overnight, so it demands rapid fuel during the day. Insulin spikes become more frequent, and in a body already under stress, each insulin surge promotes fat storage, particularly visceral fat. Over time, this pattern produces a familiar but confusing outcome: the skinny fat state. Externally, weight gain may be minimal. Internally, visceral fat accumulates, muscle mass declines, and metabolic flexibility erodes. Ironically, the harder one tries to restrict food or increase training intensity, the more threatening the environment feels to the nervous system, further elevating cortisol. The critical insight is this: effective fat loss cannot occur when the body is under nighttime stress. No fat-burning hormone functions optimally in a high cortisol environment. Missing the nighttime fat-burning window doesn't just affect one night. It triggers a cascade that influences the entire next day and beyond. If you are trapped in the loop of poor sleep, stubborn belly fat, intense cravings, and chronic fatigue, the root issue is not what you eat during the day, at least not first. The real problem is that your body never fully enters its biological repair mode at night. And until nighttime cortisol is stabilized, fat loss efforts will continue to meet a powerful, invisible resistance from within. When sleep is disrupted, the instinctive response is to force the brain back to sleep. Melatonin, sedatives, sleep teas, or aggressive relaxation techniques. But these approaches treat only the symptom, not the biological cause. They are like smashing a fire alarm to stop the noise while the fire continues to burn behind the wall. As we've established, the core issue is not that the brain doesn't want to sleep. The brain wants to sleep deeply. What forces it to wake you at 3 a.m. is the lack of sufficient fuel to maintain safety. When the liver cannot supply steady glucose through the night, the brain is compelled to activate survival mechanisms. No sleeping pill can convince the brain to remain asleep in a situation biology interprets as dangerous. So the correct question is not, how do I sleep deeper? But rather, how do I prevent the body from entering an emergency state during sleep? The answer lies in nighttime metabolic stability, specifically supporting the liver with enough fuel to supply the brain overnight. From this logic emerges a targeted intervention, often referred to as the sleep anchor. This is not random nighttime eating, nor is it a violation of dietary discipline. The sleep anchor is a deliberate metabolic strategy designed to address the precise bottleneck that causes 3 a.m. awakenings. The principle is simple yet powerful. Provide the liver with a small amount of the right fuel at the right time to prevent blood glucose from falling to emergency levels. When the liver's battery lasts through the night, the brain remains calm. No panic means no adrenaline. No adrenaline means cortisol stays low. And when nighttime cortisol is controlled, the body can finally return to repair and fat-burning mode. It is critical to note that this approach is not for everyone. If you sleep through the night without waking and show no signs of nocturnal hypoglycemia, additional nighttime fuel is unnecessary. The sleep anchor is intended for individuals with clear signs of nighttime metabolic instability, waking at the same hour, racing heart, sudden alertness, morning fatigue, and strong daytime carbohydrate cravings. A common fear is, eating before bed will make me gain fat. This belief stems from an oversimplified calorie model that ignores hormonal context. In a high nighttime cortisol state, the metabolic cost of not eating can far exceed the cost of a small, strategic fuel input. Elevated nighttime cortisol drives muscle loss, insulin resistance, visceral fat retention, and suppressed fat-burning hormones. Compared to that damage, a modest energy input to stabilize the system is an investment, not a setback. When nighttime metabolism stabilizes, the downstream effects are profound. Deep sleep returns, nighttime cortisol drops, growth hormone regains its natural rhythm, morning blood sugar stabilizes, energy improves, and carbohydrate cravings diminish. Most importantly, the body begins to perceive the environment as safe, and only then does visceral fat become accessible. The solution to 3 a.m. wake-ups is therefore not controlling the brain, but satisfying biology. When you stop fighting survival responses and start supporting the underlying metabolic needs, sleep repairs itself. And when sleep is repaired at the root, fat loss, especially stubborn belly fat, no longer feels like a battle. Once we understand why the liver runs out of fuel at night and why the brain triggers a survival response around 3 a.m., the solution is no longer about quieting the brain. It is about preventing the emergency from occurring in the first place. The sleep anchor is designed precisely for this purpose, stabilizing overnight blood sugar so the brain remains calm, the adrenal glands stay quiet, and cortisol does not rise. The sleep anchor is taken about 30 minutes before bed, close enough to support the liver through the night, but far enough to avoid digestive discomfort or delayed sleep onset. It consists of 3 complementary components, each addressing a specific biological bottleneck in the 3A. M. Wake-up cascade. The first component is raw honey, in a very small amount, roughly 1 teaspoon. Honey is not chosen simply because it is sugar, but because of its unique fructose-to-glucose ratio. Fructose is preferentially taken up by the liver and used to replenish liver glycogen directly, rather than driving rapid insulin spikes and immediate muscle uptake like pure glucose. In essence, honey acts as a gentle recharge for the liver's battery, ensuring it can supply glucose steadily throughout the night. However, honey alone can create a brief energy spike followed by a drop. This is why the second component is critical: healthy fat. Just 1 teaspoon of MCT oil, almond butter, or a small piece of grass-fed cheese is sufficient. Fat slows gastric emptying and carbohydrate absorption, transforming honey's quick energy into a slow-release fuel stream. This allows glucose to enter the bloodstream gradually, supporting the brain evenly during sleep. The third component is glycine, or collagen, which is rich in glycine. This is the most overlooked yet decisive element. Glycine is an amino acid that inhibits excitatory neural activity, calming the central nervous system. Research shows glycine can slightly lower core body temperature, a prerequisite for deep sleep. It also counterbalances adrenaline and cortisol, helping prevent the alarm response even if minor energy fluctuations occur. When combined correctly, these 3 components create a fundamentally different nighttime environment compared to going to bed depleted. The liver has sufficient fuel, the brain receives a safety signal, the adrenal glands remain inactive, nighttime cortisol stays low, and when cortisol is low, the window for deep sleep and growth hormone release can fully open. In some individuals, particularly those under high stress, following low-carbohydrate diets, or with chronically high cortisol sodium deficiency, can be an additional factor. The kidneys may excrete sodium more rapidly, reducing blood volume and triggering a secondary stress response. If symptoms persist, adding a small pinch of high-quality sea salt to the sleep anchor can further stabilize the system by supporting adrenal function and maintaining blood pressure. It is essential to emphasize again, the sleep anchor is not for everyone. If you sleep through the night without waking and show no signs of nocturnal hypoglycemia, this intervention is unnecessary. But for those trapped in the cycle of 3 a.m., wake-ups, daytime fatigue, and stubborn belly fat, it represents a precise biological strategy, not a compromise. When used appropriately, many people report profound changes. No more 3 a.m. Awakenings, deeper sleep, lighter mornings, reduced carbohydrate cravings, and gradual improvements in waist circumference. Not because they ate less, but because the body was finally allowed to burn fat in a state of safety. This question touches one of the deepest beliefs in diet culture. Eating at night causes fat gain. While this idea sounds logical on the surface, it completely ignores biological context. The body does not respond to food based on the clock. It responds based on hormonal state and metabolic safety at that moment. In the case of waking at 3 a.m. due to nocturnal hypoglycemia, The issue is not how many calories you consume, it is what happens if you consume nothing at all. 1 teaspoon of honey contains roughly 40 calories, but without that small support, the body may pay a much higher metabolic cost by activating a nighttime survival response. The cortisol surge at 3 a.m. is not a harmless spike. It triggers a cascade of damage. First, muscle loss. Elevated cortisol drives catabolism, breaking down muscle protein to produce glucose for the brain. Muscle loss not only weakens the body, but lowers resting metabolic rate, meaning fewer calories are burned the following day. Next comes insulin resistance. Cortisol raises blood glucose while simultaneously reducing insulin sensitivity. When this pattern repeats night after night, the body adapts to higher morning blood sugar levels. Energy becomes inefficiently used, and visceral fat becomes the preferred storage site for excess fuel. Finally, nighttime cortisol is a direct mechanism that locks in belly fat. Visceral fat contains more stress receptors than subcutaneous fat. When cortisol rises, the body receives a clear message: the environment is unsafe. In that state, fat retention is not a mistake, it is a survival strategy. This is why extreme nighttime fasting can paradoxically make belly fat more stubborn. Compare 2 scenarios. In the first, you eat nothing before bed, cortisol spikes at 3 a.m., muscle is broken down, hormones are disrupted, and you wake with intense carbohydrate cravings. In the second, you provide 40 calories of targeted fuel. Blood sugar remains stable, sleep continues uninterrupted, cortisol stays low, and fat-burning hormones are allowed to function. From a metabolic standpoint, the second scenario carries a far lower overall cost. It is essential to emphasize that this is not universal advice. If you sleep through the night without waking and show no signs of nocturnal hypoglycemia, eating before bed is unnecessary and may be counterproductive. In that case, nighttime fasting can be beneficial. The sleep anchor is a conditional biological intervention designed for those experiencing nighttime metabolic instability. For these individuals, not eating before bed is not discipline, it is a stressor, and any factor that increases nighttime stress will slow fat loss, especially in the abdominal region. The key takeaway is this: you do not gain fat from a teaspoon of honey. You gain fat from living in a prolonged high cortisol state. Using a small amount of energy to prevent a survival response protects muscle, preserves hormones, and allows fat loss to occur naturally. This is not a shortcut, it is biological alignment. When viewed through this lens, the fear of nighttime eating dissolves. It is no longer about rigid rules, but about context and physiology. And for those who consistently wake at 3 a.m., eating correctly before bed may be the missing piece that allows the body to exit survival mode and finally enter true recovery and fat-burning mode. Many people focus exclusively on nighttime strategies when addressing sleep and cortisol, but biology does not operate in isolated segments. Cortisol follows a 24-hour rhythm, and correcting an abnormal nighttime spike requires properly re-establishing the daytime peak. Morning, therefore, is not just the start of a new day. It is the master control point for hormonal timing. In a healthy system, cortisol has a clear role: high in the morning to promote wakefulness and energy, low at night to allow recovery. When you wake at 3 a.m. with elevated cortisol, this rhythm becomes inverted. Cortisol rises at the wrong time during the night, and as a result, morning cortisol often becomes blunted or dysregulated. This leaves you feeling groggy and dependent on early caffeine to force alertness. This is why the first corrective signal in the morning is not coffee, but sunlight. Within 30 minutes of waking, exposing your eyes to natural light, especially morning sunlight, sends a powerful signal to the brain's circadian control center. This signal tells the body, it is daytime, cortisol belongs here. When cortisol is activated at the correct time in the morning, something critical happens. The brain begins timing its decline for the evening. Circadian biology works like a domino chain. A proper peak in the morning leads to a proper trough at night. Without sufficient morning light, cortisol never reaches a clear peak, and without a peak, there is no clean drop. The result is cortisol lingering at moderate levels all day and night. Alongside light, caffeine timing is the second essential adjustment. After a poor night of sleep, Many people instinctively reach for coffee immediately, but when cortisol is trying to re-establish its rhythm, early caffeine can severely disrupt the process. Caffeine does not create energy. It blocks fatigue signals by interfering with adenosine, a molecule that accumulates to signal the need for rest. After fragmented sleep, adenosine is often not fully cleared. Drinking coffee immediately masks this signal temporarily, but does not resolve it. Adenosine accumulates behind the blockade, leading to a pronounced energy crash later in the day. That crash is particularly problematic for cortisol recovery. When energy drops suddenly, the body again turns to cortisol as an emergency solution, creating a second cortisol spike in the afternoon. This further disrupts circadian timing, making evening relaxation difficult and increasing the likelihood of another 3 a.m. awakening. Delaying caffeine intake by approximately 90 minutes after waking allows the body to clear residual adenosine naturally and complete the morning cortisol response properly. When coffee is introduced afterward, it acts as a gentle performance enhancer rather than a stress-inducing crutch. When these two morning adjustments, timely light exposure and delayed caffeine, are implemented together, the body receives a coherent message. Day and night have returned to their proper roles. Cortisol is allowed to rise during the day and fall at night. Nighttime is no longer invaded by stress hormones, and when night regains its restorative function, interventions like the sleep anchor can work at full capacity. In essence, fixing cortisol is not about correcting a single moment, but about resynchronizing the entire 24-hour cycle. Nighttime is stabilized with proper fuel. Morning is reset with light and correctly timed stimulation. When both ends align, the body can finally exit survival mode and return to the fat-burning, restorative balance it was biologically designed to maintain. Waking up at 3 a.m. isn't your failure. It's a biological signal of chronic stress and metabolic imbalance. When you understand cortisol, liver function, and circadian rhythm, fat loss stops being a willpower battle and becomes a process of restoring safety to the body. If this video helped you see the problem more clearly, make sure to subscribe to the channel, turn on notifications, and stay with us through future videos. Here, we don't fight the body, we work with its biology.